For today's video, I have a custom-built list with questions you're likely going to get asked as a senior software development engineer going into a non-technical interview. Basically, it's a list of 22 questions that I built using various research as well as my experience working with professionals going through these job interviews, and it's meant to be inclusive, to prepare you for that interview. Specifically, it's more likely to help you for an intense on-site interview, but because it's only 22 questions, it's also likely to be useful also for a phone interview if you want that. So I'll go through each of these questions. I have a couple of cheat sheets here, so we make the video more straightforward. And the main reason why I'm doing this video is because I want to provide you with insight as to why they ask you these types of questions. And the idea is that as soon as you understand why they ask you these, and if you prepare a couple of examples, you should be basically good to go on these things. The first question is, when you took something outside of your area of responsibility, but definitely your company's best interest. Now, why would someone ask you this? Well, because they want to see your sense of ownership and your work ethic. So, for example, if a project was in the woods and you took ownership of the situation and you got it out because you took a stand and basically fixed the situation. This is, the most common type of example you want to give here. Second, a time when you had a disagreement with your boss. The main reason why you'd feel uncomfortable with these questions is because you don't know why they're asking you these things, because you're not supposed to be an expert in interpersonal skills or in communication going into a software development engineer, a senior role for this. But this is exactly why they ask you. And probably the more useful advice here would be to pick a situation where you had a disagreement where you are wrong with your boss and you acknowledge they were right because they had, more intelligence than you had. This is the safest bet that you can do in a job interview, because you have no interest in showing that you showed your boss wrong, right? In a job interview. So this would be the safer bet you want to see. However, I know people who feel very comfortable talking about major disagreements into which they were right, even with their boss. So if you feel comfortable running behavioral interviews, then yes, you could also go there. The reason why I'm saying you should be wrong here is because most of the time these are individual contributor tracks, and basically you don't want to get into insubordination and all that stuff. It's too dangerous for me. Number 3, how do you make trade-offs between quality and deadlines, right? Now, why would someone ask you this question? Because they want to see your work ethic and quality of work, because trade-offs between quality and deadlines, if you lower the quality for the sake of a deadline, that's a very bad trade-off, especially talking about in job interviews. So ideally you'd want to find the time when the deadline was tight and there was no way you were going to test the software properly with the right amount of quality. So we came up with an automated testing routine that basically saved the day there. So you'd want to come with an ingenious solution here. Number 4, when you use customer feedback to drive improvement or innovation. Now, this is something that you would want to get asked simply because today we live in the age of customer. Luckily for you as a software development engineer, your customer could also be your boss, your project manager. So if you've never had external customers, which is less likely for more senior roles, then you could also talk with interaction with your manager. But you should ideally think well about how you serve customers, because especially for larger corporations, especially for in these companies, they prefer to have smaller teams that work directly with customers, and they prefer to have, to quote from someone's leadership principles, customer obsessed people. Now, you see, in terms of examples, it would be very hard for me to craft an example that would suit your needs, because any software development engineer's needs, simply because you work in various fields of work here. But working with customers, when you took feedback, I don't know, to improve an algorithm that was already working, or when maybe you had a search box that you maybe because you discussed with the customer, you understood exactly the context, the bigger picture of the search box, and implemented the better IntelliSense That's the first example that comes to mind. But the idea is that you must really show that you are customer-centric here, and you really took the customer's feedback seriously and constructively here. So I spent a little bit more time simply because this is a very important topic. When you proposed the radical approach because you saw the bigger picture, why was your approach successful? Right? So why would someone ask you this? Well, because they want to see your ability to see the bigger picture. So probably a standard example here would be when you decided to scrap a component because you felt the technology was no longer the technology at the base core of the component made it not worthwhile pushing it further. So you've chosen to develop another component or to pick another component off the shelf. So but anyway, you would want to highlight how you saw the bigger picture, and how you took the right decision here. Of course it might be a successful one, right? Because otherwise why would you talk about it? The only situations where you would want to consider talking about failures is when they ask you for failures, right? So number 6, when you performed root cause analysis on a complex problem. This is your ability to analyze root cause analysis to a complex problem, and I'm sure you have plenty of bugs or plenty of issues that required you a deep level of analysis. Now, I know one mistake people do here, especially software development engineers who are more likely to be individual contributors, is to talk about the management thing. Don't talk about management thing, talk about software, right? So always try to favor technical examples here. So of course, when you perform root cause analysis, you want to, to peel the problem, to go several layers deep. And you see, you want to also show to a certain extent attention to detail. Probably, the example is the easy part here, but the follow-up questions are the stuff that matters. So be prepared with a very strong story here. Number 7, share an experience in which your ability to consider the benefits of a potential action help you choose the most appropriate action. So this is again about your attention to detail and your ability to dive deep here. So for example, if you're a software development engineer and you have to pick, you're working for a web streaming project, and you have to pick the best possible streaming component. Now, the process would be that you would have to have a decision. You would have to consider, let's say, 4 such video streaming components. You would have your skills and expertise from previous projects, and you would also have your team to consider all these things. So basically, you would want to do some testing with each of these components, how easy they are to integrate, how customizable they are, what about the quality of the video, maybe some other constraints, maybe if it's a small business, even the financial constraints. But you would want to consider the benefits of this action, and you want to sound like you made a proper decision there. You want it to be the right call, of course, but you want to really explain your decision-making process within that context. And from experience, these are pretty tricky to find out as examples, as proper examples with decision logics made by you as the main actor are pretty tough to find. So that's why I believe it's a great idea to brainstorm for a story here. Number 8, share an experience where you applied a new technology or information in your job. How did it help your company? So when you apply the new technology or information in your job, so primarily here, why they're asking it is because they want to see your ability to learn, and to what extent you're excited about learning about new technologies. So here, I'm sure you have a ton of examples if you'll be in touch with the technology field. I found that usually the interviewers that ask you this are also technical people. So basically, this would be your own world, but still something interesting you would want to consider here. Give me an example when you thought outside the box. How did it help your employer? So when you think outside the box, it's again, if you think about your ability to learn and basically also to some extent invent some invention, some trick you had to do. Basically, the most common types of examples here are some fix that basically saves the day in an environment. So I'm sure you can brainstorm for something like this pretty easily. Number 10, when you try to understand the problem with your team and you had to go several layers down to figure it out, what challenges did you encounter? So if you remember, we briefly touched upon kind of the same topic earlier. This is about your ability to dive deep into a problem, but also your ability to deliver on that, right? So when you have a major issue, right, with your team, and you had to go several layers deep. So on one hand, you must find the proper problem, which you want to explain, how you dive deep and eventually perform a larger analysis. But since it's within your team, you would also want to talk about how you collaborated with other members of the team in order to get this fixed. Now, by team, don't feel constrained like you're just immediate people that you're working day to day. Maybe it's a team, maybe it's a larger team of smaller teams. So don't feel constrained of your primary team only. So you could eventually also work with a customer if that was part of the team at that time. So relax a little bit on the team side. And again, on one hand, it's analysis. On the other hand, it's also about communicating with the team. When you missed an obvious solution to a problem. Now, this is one of the more counterintuitive ones, and this is something specific to everyone's business. So, of course, the reason why they ask it is because they want to see your judgment and your, to a certain extent, analysis and ability to deliver, but your judgment. And here, probably the most valuable part is the question itself. When you missed an obvious solution to a problem, now let me tell you my experience very quickly. When I started this YouTube channel, I started sharing about what the stuff that I thought would be interesting. And nobody was watching these videos. And this, of course, being the main problem. How I fixed this problem was to actually publish HR content that people actually want to consume, right? This is a much longer story that took me 2 years or 1 year to understand, of course. But this would be a time when I missed an obvious solution to a problem. So I've been sharing for 1 year what people were not really interested in, and then I figured out, yes, this would be something more interesting for the right type of people. So you would want to find some trick, something that changed the course of an action significantly, and of course, ultimately help you to deliver success. When you had to, number 12, when you had to quickly adjust your work priorities to meet changing demands. Now, this is because they want to see your bias for action. Adjusting your work priorities to meet changing demands, this should essentially happen in any high-performing project. There's no project that goes as planned. So think about a particular project where you made some adjustments quickly. You had really that bias for action there, and that was key to successful delivery in that project. On the same topic, a time when you were 75% through a project and had to pivot strategy to ensure its successful completion. Now, this is from experience. This is a trick question for many people because they don't understand the 75% part. Like, you don't have to be 75% of a project. The idea is that you have to be towards the end of the project when the pressure is high, when you had a challenge and you had to pivot strategy to ensure that the project was getting delivered. Right. So if I reframe it a little bit, then it's also probably going to sound a bit more friendly to you. But still, the main reason why someone would ask you this is because they want to see your ability to deliver on a project. A time when you fail to deliver something significant and what you learned from it. Now, this is a huge topic in behavioral interviewing, failure stories. Failure stories are something, if you're not used to it and if you're new to behavioral interviewing, you have to understand that it takes time to find proper failure stories for most candidates. I'd even go as far as to bid that it will take you 3 tries until you'll find the proper failure that you're talking about. Also, from experience, it's not the failure that's the essence here. It must be a proper failure. If you fake it, of course, it's a bad idea, but no matter how big it was the failure, it's all about how you communicate it. Of course, you must use the STAR format, and in this context of the STAR format, half of it should be on the situation, action, and task, half of it, and the other half of it should be on the results. It should be a quantifiable failure, like if you had a small business and one bust, it's quantifiable enough. And in the learnings, you must talk about how you grew from that experience. right? So this is a long story short here, but I will also link a couple of videos about helping you to better answer failure stories in behavioral interviews, because I've done plenty of these. Number 15, a time when you faced a problem that had multiple possible solutions. So a problem with multiple possible solutions. If you remember previously, I talked about that video component, video streaming component, with multiple solutions. You would want to explain how you test each of those solutions, and you've arrived, based on your experience, based on testing, based on collaboration with your team, you arrived at the best possible solution in this context. You would also, on one hand, it's about decision making, but also how you navigate to a certain extent through ambiguity. Ambiguity is also something that you often have to touch upon in job interviews, and ambiguity also working with data would be another topic that comes to mind here. A time when you coached a low performer, right? So if you're even thinking that, hey, how am I supposed to coach other people as a software development engineer, then probably you are too junior for the role that you're applying for. So needless to say, you must think about the best possible examples, and don't just think about when a colleague got stuck and you helped fix something. Think about more interesting examples. When you had someone new on the team and you help them navigate through a very complex project that you have been developing for 3 years, and how you set up a plan, how you set up one-on-ones, and all the journey that help you and help your friend to get on track. Or you had a low performer, so you literally had a low performer on the team and how you help them. But don't be as straightforward, like just you coach them for 1 hour. Today, 1 hour after 1 week, and everything was back on track. So try to find something more interesting, or if it was that straightforward, then it must have been you that came up with that click. That's something special about you. So don't take boring examples here. Try to find something interesting. Number 18, let's say you need something important from a coworker and that person isn't responding. How would you deal with this? Right, so this is another rather counterintuitive one. Why would someone ask you this? Well, because they want to see your interpersonal skills. They want to see how your ability to establish trust here. So I'm sure this happens all the time, and I'm sure there are various ways to go about this. Just again, the interview it's very much about yourself and what you did, and the thing you would want to avoid at all costs is making it sound like the other party was wrong, right? So don't put the blame on anyone in a job interview. From here on, I think you have enough information to find the example. Number 18, describe a situation where you negotiated with others in your organization to reach an agreement, right? So this is another question that might get asked because they want to see your interpersonal skills. Now, one mistake that many software development engineers do is to find management-related examples, like examples that would be more suitable for manager-level roles. So don't get into politics, into office politics by any means. Try to find something technical that you had to negotiate with others in your organization to reach an agreement. If it was a little bit of politics, no problem, but the idea is that it must be a technical thing primarily that you were in charge of, and how you looked at the pros and cons and the whole journey. And finally, the last 3 questions are 20, 21, and 22 are more general in nature. The first one, what's your strength? The main reason why someone would ask you this, and they do ask you these questions for more senior roles, is that they want to see what's that one thing that sets you apart from other candidates. If you're new to behavioral interviewing, I've had cases where it took even multiple days for someone to find out their true strength, simply because you don't think of this all the time. Most of you don't. So you must find that one thing that sets you apart from other candidates, and it's hugely important in a job interview that you advertise always on your strengths. How you pitch your strengths is another story, whether you pitch it by name, for example, persuasiveness, whether you pitch it by name or whether you pitch it by context. I publish 400 videos until now. That's up to you how you pitch it, but you must know your strength. Very important. And why do you want to work for this company? This is one of the classic ones, that usually gets asked in the early stages of of the conversation with the company or an interview with the company. Now you could pick various reasons why you want. I'll just mention a couple of these. Probably a very powerful one, especially with HR people, is that you have a coworker already working for that company, or even some referral that sends you some very positive news, and since you know each other, is going to represent a very strong plus for you going into that role. Or also for HR people, where do you see yourself 5 years from now, could also be an excellent reasoning on why do you want to work for this company. If you link your 5-year plan with the job that you're applying for, then that's how you get HR people. Read the company's mission and link to that, especially to its principles or values. Again, how do you link this varies by company. For example, if you do this at Amazon, it's probably cliche to talk about 5 principles in the same sentence, because you like ownership, invent and simplify, and I don't know what else. So it's a bit cliche to talk about this for Amazon. So you'd want to make it sound from the context. If you're applying for Facebook, well, Sheryl Sandberg starts or used to start an internal meeting with the company's mission and core values. So knowing that they don't really push all that much as Amazon in job interviews about the mission and core values, you would probably could pitch those by name, simply because it's a different context. At Apple, for example, the interest is significantly less with these things, but still you might impress the right type of candidate, the right type of interviewer with if you know this. If you don't know these, chances are they won't be too happy about this, especially the non-technical interviewers. And last but not least, the one you would really want to prepare on, and the one that's most often asked, is tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself is that one question that you might get asked 6 times if you have 6 rounds of interviews of on-sites. So it's always a good idea to prepare. I'll link a couple of videos in the description if you want to learn more about the tell me about yourself. So this will be the list with, I believe, what's the more inclusive questions you would want to think about going into a non-technical part of your job interview. Feel free, to let me know your feedback, if any, and thank you very much for watching.